So thank you, Jacqueline, for coming on to the Mental Insights podcast. This is episode number 31, and it's such a pleasure to have you on to speak about some very important conversations within mental health and what we can do to change the conversation. So thank you for being here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
It's my pleasure. I'm glad we were able to do this as we've, known each other for some years, but haven't really discussed such an important topic. This definitely brought us together to share some valuable information for my audience. So I'm really excited to get started and create this conversation with you today.
And similar experiences that you and I both had that we didn't even know. So.
Exactly. And, that's what it takes, years to then eventually come down the road, right, where we live in a society that, we can be open about these conversations and, it brings people together in beautiful ways to, help create change within
right.
such an important field. So to start off, this is a question that I ask a lot of my guests, and I think it gives a good interpretation about your own personal experiences and just gives the audience a better interpretation of who you are. So when did mental health really become a priority or become a topic that was of such valuable interest within your own life?
Yeah, so growing up, I kind of always remember being impacted by my mental health, like having severe anxiety. My parents got divorced when I was really young, and kind of with that, I went down different paths, and it definitely influenced a lot of decisions that I made growing up, and it was always in the background of my life, And probably about a year and a half ago, I found myself in a rut, which the biggest kind of rock bottom I think that I could have hit and didn't even realize where I was in my life. I kind of said to myself, I'm either going to find this determination to make this a priority, or I'm going to, lose my life. Something serious is going to happen to me. So since then, that year and a half ago, I've kind of spent most of my time dedicating it to my mental health and my overall wellness, and talking and speaking to others about how they can improve their lives and find resources and just kind of mentor others to kind of get on a better path. So it took me a while to find the determination and the will to make it a priority, and when I did it, it was the best decision I ever made. So
thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. And it's definitely something that we're going to speak more about in terms of, the will, the determination in order to, seek out what's necessary within your life, especially within a conversation that many people have this, stigma associated with that creates a big overarching change within, how we can effectively help people who are struggling with, a lot of these issues that are coming into place today.
Right.
Within the availability of resources, from your own perspective, how is mental health being viewed within our society today? What is your perception on the availability of resources and how we're able to help others through any sort of mental health condition that they face today?
It's kind of funny because mental health has always existed. It's not something that just, came out of the woodwork, and now it's something that we kind of recently started talking about. So when we kind of discuss resources, I'm not an expert, but I've been a patient and I've, been through recovery. It's really hard. And, people are just starting to talk about the stereotypes of mental health, but in terms of actually getting help and finding that path, I think it's really hard, especially as being a young adult. We know therapists are out there, hospitals are out there, inpatient facilities are out there, but you and I talked about this a little bit before, what works for everybody else is the hardest part about finding your resource. For me, it was so hard to find what helped because it was the first therapist I went to wasn't the best one for me. The first path I kind of took wasn't the best for me. It took trial and error. And a lot of people don't want to put the effort in for trial and error to kind of find the path to be able to start to heal. And to be completely honest, I was Googling stuff, Googling places to try to find this place specialize in this and this place, and just calling different doctors and kind of doing whatever I could to just see what was in my area. It's hard because in different cities have different resources, different hospitals. And in Connecticut, we have a great resource. The Institute of Living is a fabulous place. In Massachusetts, I know they have a bunch of great places also, but not everybody has that center to go to, So that's a big thing that I know a lot of people struggle with.
Totally. I mean, with a lot of cities and, different states, there's a lot of waitlisting right now, even for therapy and such. And as you stated, it's trial and error, which I think, like you're saying, a lot of people don't want to succumb to. They don't want to put in that time and effort, which is tough because sometimes just speaking with somebody is that one dividing change that a lot of people can have. But like you stated, there are actual facilities and in or outpatient care that could be a further step than therapy for some people who truly need that support and that guidance.
Yeah, I agree totally.
And it's definitely so interesting, as you were saying, that mental health has been around forever. It's something that's just within the human condition, and it's such a topic that isn't talked about. It's such a topic that isn't spoken about throughout our youth, but as well throughout adults today. And through your own personal experiences, how has the transition been from the conversation about mental health throughout even your own transition within people around you, or even just as you view society today? What is your perception of mental health being talked about?
I think that it's changing. It's changing. I think in a positive way, and we're going in a good direction. It's not moving at the speed of light, but I think a big thing is that universities start doing some training to kind of be aware of signs and symptoms. I think that kind of education, Florida just kind of put that order into place where like K through 12 kids are going to have some mental health training. I think that, we can talk all we want, but until, some kind of training gets in place where people can kind of know signs and stuff, that's when I think that we'll actually see a flip in the mental health world. From behind the scenes, what I can kind of say from therapists and people that I work with, the conversation is being talked about, and athletes are starting to talk about it. There's, in the NFL, they're talking about having almost, mandatory mental health checks. Student athletes don't really, they don't talk about mental health, and they absolutely should. That's a huge area of where mental health is not even discussed, and totally needs to be. So I think it's going in a good direction, but it's not where we want it to be,
Definitely. I completely agree. And you brought up some, great opportunities for where there can be change. Within student athletes, it's definitely a big priority. I interviewed a woman named Audrey Grunst, and what she is trying to provide is mental health services for women in their youth who are whether they're in high school or college. And I saw that and thought it was amazing because, her perspective was that you have 20 people to help you with physical injuries to maybe one to help you with mental health, condition or injury as well. And, that's staggering, even if they have the mental health services as well. You're talking about school education, which is of the utmost importance, I believe, especially in youth, within, emotional learning, within anything, just signs and symptoms. It offers a great awareness. I interviewed someone from Ohio. Her name is Nancy Eigel Miller, and she is the founder of an organization, 1 in 5, and they educate children throughout school systems about signs and symptoms, about emotional learning. And what they just passed in Florida, they're hoping to pass in Ohio within the coming months. So that was something really exciting to see, which needs to continually happen throughout in the U.S.
And I think that's the change, again, that I kind of reiterated, that will flip, the world. And there's an NFL player, Brandon Marshall, him and his wife have a non-for-profit. They train a lot of kids at University of Central Florida, but they have an amazing program. I think it's called like office. It's called, I can't remember, Year 365, something like that. But they just have a great, they work with athletes and non-athletes, but really college students, just knowing signs and symptoms. So we just need more people that are like public figures like that are willing to put that effort in.
I completely agree. Yeah, I think they have the most power in terms of, creating a big change. Within the NBA, I believe there's some happenings throughout mental health services as well. So, these public figures definitely need to start changing the conversation, rather than a lot of, little audiences and building up. I think we can create a lot more change throughout some more prominent figures within our society. So hopefully that can continue. But at the very least, at least throughout state to state, we're doing some things to move forward. And like you said, we are in a positive direction for that.
Right.
To, transition a little bit within the actual, mindset and perspective of mental health. And I think one thing that's truly a big topic within mental health today is, being or having fears, being or having, a side that's driving some sort of, whether it's negativity or whether it's just a different perspective throughout your own life, within actually seeking services and as well just within your mental health. How can fear dictate someone from reaching out, whether it's to a friend or whether it's to a service, whether it's, seeking out a therapist or going into, a more prominent treatment facility?
Yeah. So I think that we could talk about this all day, really. Fear just is such a big component into healing and getting help and recovery. Like, it totally plays a part into every phase of your kind of path that you're choosing to take. I think probably the first part of it would be fear of facing your illness, addiction, whatever it kind of is. That's the initial fear. That can just be asking for help. Like, I know my own experience. I had a phone number that I could call. It was like to a recovery program, and I left it on my desk for probably 3 weeks before I called in. Every day I would look at it like, I need to call this number. And I was so afraid just to get help because I didn't know what it would be like if I could do it, or what the grass really was greener on the other side. So I eventually called the number, and it was the best thing I ever did for myself. And that's kind of when I made mental health a priority. But just like, just to list a few things, like fear of, losing your dignity, fear of not being accepted, fear of not being able to commit to recovery, fear of actually not getting better, fear of not being able to cope, fear of yourself, fear of, can you do it? Fear of losing your identity. I think that's also a big one. A lot of people identify with their addiction or their illness or, just anything, their trauma, it's them. So moving on from that is really fearful. And life after that, healing, is also just another path of fear, So it really plays a big role into everything. And I'm dealing with it myself every day, kind of just trying to master, I am afraid of doing this, but I have to push myself. So everyone feels it. And that's, I would want people to know that they're not alone with the fear thing, because if I could say anything to anybody, it would be that fear is real, it's alive, but, you can face it. So
that's great. Thank you for that. For fear, I think it definitely offers a great, interpretation of, what you're going through. And it's something that can be something to, face in a good way. And I think it offers a lot of learning. It offers different challenges, certainly, but it's something that can help you grow and move forward. And for a lot of people, making that first step is always the hardest one, but that's always the most beneficial, because once they see the other side of that wall that they're trying to get over, they can see why it's so important to make that step.
Yeah.
I think that's why, some people just creating that first step, I think, can change a big perspective on how they see anything throughout their life, because fear dictates a lot of just, how a person can be. A lot of things change the way that they behave within their interactions. And for, a lot of people, it's the big determination of seeking help. It's about reaching out. And I think especially for the youth, you can see how reaching out is something that's so hard because there's all these perspectives and all of these perceptions of how a person should be, and within social media and all of these different realms that can create opportunity for, fears and for challenges that await them. I think, it's definitely something that young children can be better educated on, the impacts of fears, why necessarily sometimes they can, face their fears accordingly. But I think the community as a whole has to come together in a better way. And, unfortunately, there is a lot of hate and a lot of distress going on in our world today. But hopefully, there can be a better sense of, community throughout our society today, specifically within mental health, especially. There's a lot of different things being attached, and, that's creating more of a stigma and more of a different approach and awareness of what mental health is. And it could necessarily change the conversation to continuing to be in a negative light. So hopefully we can try to, push down a lot of those negative messages about mental health, and we can create it to be a normal conversation, such as physical health, such as, just breaking your leg. It's the same perspective for a person. And I think that's something that we need to continually work on and improve within our society today.
Yeah.
Within, this conversation of mental health and physical health, and as well emotional health, can you speak about the importance of showing up every day? Because mental health is not a battle that you can just change overnight. It's not something that one day it's just going to be fixed. It's something that you have to continually change and continually work on. So what is the importance of showing up every day and saying that I'm going to be most effective and most focused on my own mental health and what I can do today to make my own life better?
Yeah, so this is probably one of my favorite things to talk about when I'm mentoring or just kind of speaking to others about mental health and the importance of it. I really believe in overall wellness, eating healthy. You can take medicine and go to therapy and be in a cycle of just feeling okay, but there's other components of life that also play into part of your mental health. And I think that there's a huge misconception about that. So healthy eating, and when I say that, I don't mean like eating a salad with no dressing. I mean like finding balance, things that you like. And a lot of people say go exercise. Like if that doesn't work for you, you don't like that, go for a walk. You know what I'm saying? Like for me, I love to paint. I paint, and I'm an interior designer, so I do that for a living. And those are things that bring me to my center and help my overall wellness. What I don't believe in is just taking a medicine and just being like, okay, that's it. You have to be committed. And that's like such a hard thing to say, and I'm still mastering it. But the importance of showing up every day and being committed to yourself and saying, mind, body, spirit is crucial to living a full life. And I really, really, really believe that, because if you're doing kind of half or a quarter, you're not living the highest quality life you can live. So it's not the key to happiness, it's not the key to success, but I think it's mind opening to eat well, exercise, and find that, the mind does heal the body and the body does heal the mind. So, yeah.
That's great. No, I love it. I find that those type of, different routines that you think, you enjoy and you find best for yourself are so important. And, whether it's, cooking and a certain meal, whether it's going for a walk, whether it's being in nature, there's a lot of different aspects that have been studied that are good for our mental health. And sure enough, it's something that, as humans, it's just 5 or 10 minutes that we can focus on, and it'll drastically change the way that we experience our day and how we interact with other people throughout our day. I think it's so awesome that just such daily natural habits can have such a profound effect on our mental health. And for you to have to experience such, sort of trauma, or, some type of experience that changes your awareness about mental health, I think you still need both approaches in order to, find that light of finding out what's best for you, finding out, which routines you like, what's best for you, because it's,
Mm-hmm.
like we were saying, it's an everyday battle. You
Yeah.
constantly have to show up, you constantly have to work on improving yourself. And, you're not just going to wake up and realize that, your life's great and you don't necessarily have to follow through
And
with.
it's a custom plan. Like, I have a joke, like, you go to Chipotle and customize what you're eating, but you have to do the same thing for your whole life. Like, what works for me might not work for you, and what works for you might not work for the person next to you. So I think that's a big part of it too.
Definitely. And, such like you were saying about therapy, it's the trial and error. It's similar to that in terms of, you need to figure out what's best for you, whether it's, going for a walk, whether it's just calling a friend, whether it's journaling, like yourself, painting. So there's many different opportunities. There's so many different things that people can do today to find, happiness, to work within their creativity, to work within, any of their skills. But it's about finding that. And for a lot of people who experience these negative situations, a trauma or such, it blocks them in order to, be their true selves, and do what they truly want. Often a lot of people that, are typical within facing depression or facing any type of, serious mental health condition such as bipolar disorder or, schizophrenia. There's many different aspects of how it changes you and how you bring your environment around yourself. So it's, the environment in and of itself is a big change and a big thing that can have a lot of proponents. And I think that's something to really speak about is, how does the role of your environment play within your own mental health? So whether it's just your relationships or whether it's, just the environment in terms of your home, the culture that you provide yourself around you, who you're interacting with, what you're doing throughout your day, what role does that play within just your own daily mental health and how you perceive yourself and the world around you?
This is it's a tricky question because, like, I can speak for myself, but also there's so many people that are trying to get better but have such unsupportive households, and they're young and they can't really get out of that situation. So we have a lot of like counterproductive healing going on in the world. Kind of where I'm at in my life that I could probably, speak the most relevance on is school and work. A lot of times college students are experiencing illnesses because that's sort of the age where some of these things comes out, especially schizophrenia, bipolar. And they'd say they don't show up to class or they don't show up to an event. It's quick for a professor to say, C, D, F, they skipped class, instead of being like, signs, symptoms, what's going on, And work is the same thing. For me, I had to actually drop everything I was doing to focus on my mental health. That's not the case for everybody, but your environment is like kind of everything, Can you heal in that environment? Is the coping skills that you're learning at therapy and stuff strong enough to keep you going in that other world you're living in? So it's a really tough thing to kind of talk about because everyone's situation is so different. I wish that professors and people in the workplace were more trained on mental health signs and symptoms and, being able to give time off and not affecting your grades or your pay, whatever the situation is. That's kind of, for me, my opinion, my wish, because there isn't a lot we can do about young kids that are in toxic households, but yeah. And on relationships, if you're not doing well and you have the other person's in a relationship, it can be a really toxic situation. I've seen a lot of that in the mental health world. It can be dangerous, actually.
Definitely. Within relationships, it's important to, have supportive people, but as well, if you're in a relationship where you're not in the same situations, it obviously can be toxic. There can be some harms in place. So, that's what I was able to find out, that focusing on yourself and, showing up every day to be the best version of yourself is most important, rather than, when people get into those relationships and they are suffering from mental health injury condition, they often will lean on that other person more than leaning on themselves. And that obviously creates a lot of discourse and a lot of.
And I learned that from first experience. So it's very, very true.
Certainly I have as well. And it definitely changes the course of how you can, be in an important relationship and respect not only the other partner, but yourself as well. So it's definitely something that needs to be forefront within, someone's awareness, is knowing that their mental health has to come first, and they obviously can support each other, but it needs to be in, a welcoming environment. As well, you spoke about children and having households that can, cause a lot of harm. And, often that's where a lot of mental health conditions are really coming from.
Developed, yeah.
Exactly. It's a lot to do with parental figures.
Trauma.
Yeah. Trauma is like the bare bones of what I've seen throughout the mental health community today is, trauma is one of the leading causes of, behavioral problems, or, different emotional coping mechanisms that aren't necessarily the right thing for them. Whether it's, throughout their interactions with others, or even with themselves. So it's something that I think, like you're saying, within education, within schools, or within just education within households, can be a big proponent and a big changer throughout that, because you have parents of a generation that hasn't been taught about mental health because it wasn't a priority, and they're raising children that now are experiencing a lot of severe mental health troubles. That is not only, I mean, it's been seen throughout statistics that it's getting worse throughout every day. So, if they're not educated, how are they going to educate the children? So it's
It's a toxic cycle a lot of times,
Exactly. When one experiences it, they often, create a lot of harm on the other person. Through a lot of people who have trauma throughout their childhood, they have led to harming other people due to that experience, because whether it's they don't feel worthless, whether it's they want someone to feel what they went through, there's a lot of different scenarios that cause people to want to continue this trend that we see throughout childhood trauma, especially.
Yep.
Within mental health as a whole, I think there's a lot of different places where you can really focus on, and there's different areas that you can see. And like we were talking about before, focusing on yourself, I think is a big proponent. You're saying showing up every day, and that's a big aspect in terms of, creating a better mental health environment, creating a better lifestyle for yourself. Within your own experiences, how are you able to find the ability to, learn to love yourself, learn to show up every day and want to commit to being a better person, and, finding out who you truly wanted to be? Because oftentimes we get lost within ourselves throughout, a lot of these, whether it's a trauma or whether it's, a different aspect of how your mind and, perspective is within your life, within your mental health. How were you able to find that aspect of love within yourself and find out that you needed to take care of yourself every day?
Yeah, I think that this is a battle that a lot of people don't even want to begin. And I don't mean that in the way where people don't want to love themselves. I just mean that it's a battle to get there. And if you and I were to have this conversation a year ago, I couldn't be saying any of this, because it would be like, I would be a total hypocrite, and I couldn't even say it and mean it. Now I'm in the place in my life where I can say it, mean it, and speak my truth. So there's just a few words that I kind of live by, and it's forgiving myself for kind of what I went through, the people that were around me that, you know, didn't uplift me necessarily, forgiving myself for what I did to others when I wasn't, you know, well, or whatever I was going through. Kind of shaking that shame and guilt that you feel, you know, once you've kind of gotten better. That's a big part of it. And I think a lot of people feel shame and guilt, and that really kind of disrupts them from finding inner peace and self-love. And gratitude, you know, now that I am kind of here and I'm living and I have quality of life, I'm just so thankful for, you know, to be able to do what I do every day and to share my story. And I think that I find a lot of peace in that, and I think I find self-love. And I have a lot of great people around me. I have a small circle, but I love them unconditionally. And I kind of one day was like, you know what, if I can love all these people around me and be so loyal to them, I can love myself too. So it took many, many years, and kind of this last year and a half where I've struggled the most that I've ever struggled in my life, to kind of be where I am and just kind of soak in the gratitude that I have for human life and be able to kind of help the next person. Because to me, that's the most important part about all of this. You know, you and I can sit here all day and talk about whatever, but if, you know, the next person isn't hearing it and it's not resonating with them, you know, we're not helping, we're not doing our job. So I think that there's peace in a lot of those things. So
That's so awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. And, you know, it offers the perspective of, you know, how important just having the conversation is within mental health, within, you know, our own experiences. Mental health is something that everyone faces on a daily, you know, it's something that everybody experiences. Not, you know, everybody suffers from a psychological injury, but they do have mental health. They are thinking every single day, and necessarily they could face, you know, positive and negative approaches of their own mental health. And creating the awareness that it's okay, it's something to, you know, speak about and share, is something, you know, why I have so much gratitude, you know, similar to you. And, you know, once you go through these experiences, once you face some of these very low points within your life, it offers that,
yeah,
you know, that weight off your shoulders, but as well, just the perspective that you can share your story and share your experiences in order to help the next person, to help the youth behind you. And I think that's what's so great about a lot of the community within mental health, is everybody is becoming more confident within sharing their stories, within sharing their own approach. And that's going to save many lives down the line. That's going to change the conversation. It's going to make people feel more confident to reach out, to seek out that support. Like we were saying, that people feel so fearful and fear, you know, just the perspective or the perception of themselves, you know, seeking out help within their own mental health. And that's something that eventually we're going to change. It's going to be just as similar as going to the doctor for a broken foot.
yeah,
You know, it's an everyday battle, and this one conversation, I think, you know, creates that next step within that approach. And I'm definitely grateful that you were here today to speak on this podcast. It was, you know, honestly such a pleasure. But
well, I'm so glad that I got to kind of share a piece of my story. It's not every day that you get to be on a podcast and be able to talk to somebody as inspiring as you. And I've told you this before, people are so lucky to hear from you and what you have to say, and it's special. It's a special thing. So thank you.
I appreciate that. I greatly appreciate that. It's definitely something that, you know, sparked a true you know, a true love within myself to want to share my own story and speak with people who have experienced it, and, you know, just share resources for people who might not necessarily have the ability to. And, you know, we spoke about this earlier about, you know, just scrolling through the internet, and you can find out so many resources today. So I think that's what's so beautiful about it, is that, you know, someone can listen to this conversation and maybe spark that insight that they need to seek out services, or they need to, you know, reach out to a friend. And
yeah,
that's what's so great about having these conversations. And, you know, before I let you go, I have a question that I love to ask all my guests. And
Oh gosh.
it's put into perspective that you're writing a book about your life story. So obviously you don't have, as many years as some other people throughout their own journey thus far, but you certainly have had some experiences and certainly have had some great lessons within your life.
Yeah.
But I want you to, wrap that into, a book per se of what you've experienced so far, and tell us what one chapter of your life would be. It can be at any point throughout your life, but just one lesson, one experience, or maybe just one message that you want to have towards anybody out there, whether it's within the mental health field or whether it's just within something that you've really been touched by and what's really changed, the course of your own life and perspective today.
Okay, so the first thing that comes to mind would be heal for those around you, heal for yourself, but be you. Like, I went through a very short period when I went to college. I think you knew me in high school. I was like long hair, baggy clothes, like black nails, just myself, and that's just me. And I went to college and I switched things up, dyed my hair blonde and whatever, but that wasn't me. Like, this is me. And if I could write a book, it would be find yourself over and over and over again until you are there. And when you're there, you'll know you are. But the first, part of it is heal and then find yourself. So I don't know if that answers the question really, but
That certainly
that's kind of what comes to my mind.
That certainly does. Thank you for that answer. And I'm glad that you're finally, finding yourself throughout this one period. And certainly there's going to be many more as to finding new ways about yourself and new things that are going to bring a better light within your life. And it's so awesome to hear about your own experiences within mental health, in a conversation that needs to continue. Yeah. So, I thank you for that answer, because I think healing is definitely the first step. And then moving forward, it's just taking that first step. And for a lot of people, it's either seeking resources or it's finding out those routines like we were talking about to move forward and make the next step within your life. But, the message that you were really bringing out throughout the conversation was surrounding yourself with great people, providing a good environment within yourself, which is so important within your own mental health. So I'm so glad you were able to share a lot of this valuable insights and messages towards mental health and why it's so important. So thank you for being on this episode of the Mental Insights podcast, Jacqueline. I greatly appreciate you being here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.